Las Vegas, Nevada for the first ever Hearthstone Masters Tour event. We started with 287 of the world's best Hearthstone players, but have cut the field in half after day one. The remaining players are all looking for their share of a $500,000 prize pool and the title of Masters Tour Las Vegas champion. Greetings, everyone, from the Link Hotel Ballroom. My name is Frode. I'm joined by Derek Brown. And after one day of play, the field of nearly 300 players has been cut in half. We'll find out who is going to be able to advance to the top 8, who will be the Masters Tour champion, and who continues their dream to become a Hearthstone pro. What's up, Derek? How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Like you said, we've got so many of the absolute best Hearthstone players, full stop, in the world competing here. Already many of them eliminated, but just a few with the hope of advancing through to the top 8.
That's right. We have some of the best players. We have some of the best dressed casters, none of which apparently are joining me on the broadcast. Derek, that shirt looks 2 sizes too big and also way too many islands to represent my ideal pattern shirt. Did you not bring any clothes with you to Vegas?
I mean, I did, but I packed them before I broke my arm, and so the gag gift that my girlfriend bought me for when we went on holiday will have to suffice, I'm afraid.
So you breaking your arm made you unable to wear shirts?
Yes.
Ah, I see. That is weird. I hope I never break my arm then.
Yeah, or maybe we'll have some advice for Dog. 7-0 in this tournament.
That's fair enough. That's right. That's a great segue. You know, speaking of shirts or people not wearing them, we have a lot of players who have done very well after 7 rounds of Swiss. But before we go into that, let's go ahead and talk about what is the Masters Tour. At a glance, we had 250 competitors, or more than that rather, play online or special invite. Special invite can be through Grandmasters qualification and that of the sort. And it's a very truly global competition. Over 50 countries represented here for $500,000, thanks to the Masters Tour bundle that you guys saw in the preview leading up to the opening. Important to note too, by the way, that if you see the Vegas event and you've been enjoying it so far, or even if you're in your hotel room and you're like, you know what, this is a cool event, I want to qualify for another one, the qualifiers are going through right now. Just go to battlefight.com/HSEsports. You see the button that says join now for a tournament. They've outlaid it every single day of the week so you can play in those open cups. It'll be going from now, today, June 15th, until June 30th.
Yeah, there's even a live qualifier here for some of the players who have been eliminated from the Masters Tour in Las Vegas in order to qualify through to Seoul in a couple of months' time. And I'm excited for Seoul as well, but for the moment, we have to get done with the Masters Tour in Las Vegas first. Day 2, we're going to be playing 5 more rounds of Swiss for a total of 12, and then we're going to start with our dual tournament initial matches to get down to our top 8 for tomorrow.
That's right. Ultimately, our top 8 will play a dual tournament that's similar to what you've seen in championships, as well as back in the world in 2019 in Taiwan, where we have group stage go into the top 4. And from there, it'll be single elimination all the way through, improving to a best of 5, which is fascinating to see how Specialist really scales, if whether or not that extra game match can make a big difference in ultimately people's results. And with that, speaking of results, you mentioned Dog being 7-0, Derek, undefeated. Him, along with 2 other players, Gallon and Hypno, are undefeated so far. Now, going into day number 2, usually we stop Swiss when there's like 1 undefeated player. So normally in this field, we'd probably play 1 or 2 more rounds and we'd call it a day. But this time around, we're going to be playing up to 12 rounds. So it's likely that a lot of these players who are undefeated might end the Swiss portion with like 2 losses, but they're still very much top of the standings.
Yeah, I'm very glad that we are doing the full 12 rounds of Swiss, given that obviously the switch over to Specialist, best of 3, we can get through the rounds a little bit quicker, so we can separate the wheat from the chaff even more effectively than usual with Dog, Gallon, and Hypno. I believe that's 2 warriors and a mage for Dog. It's a very distinct kind of hybrid version of mage without the mana cyclone in there.
All right, let's take a look at the top performing classes on top of the players. As you can see, that Mage has a high win rate, to say the least. In fact, it's got such a large win rate. Its average win rate across the board is like a few standard deviations higher than the second highest, which is Hunter at 51%. Is this purely because of all the warriors, Derek?
I think it's partly because of all the warriors. That definitely helps, given that the mage has a pretty good matchup, especially when a lot of players are taking in Luna's Pocket Galaxy into their primary deck list. But I think it's also because a lot of the players whom I respect the most are bringing the mage. A lot of the best players represented here came to the conclusion that if there's going to be a lot of warriors, I'm going to bring the mage to counter them, and they are playing it absolutely spectacularly.
That's right. Highlighted by the fact that on the bottom right of your screen you see Rogue is weak against Mage, apparently, which is supposed to be a class that counters Mage. People have traditionally said, like, yeah, Rogue just beats the Mage up and whatnot, but they're even teching for it, right? They have, like, the walk, the plank, the big game hunter, and yet they're still losing to the Mage. Very interesting to see. Maybe there's a lot more credence to the idea that Mage is a lot better, or, as Derek has appropriately said, there's no reason to respect players that don't bring Mage.
That is literally exactly
what your words, not mine.
Anyone who brings Rogue is terrible, I believe.
You said, okay, in all seriousness, you said, quote, the players that I respect brought Mage.
That I respect the most.
Yeah, I mean, I have to paraphrase it because I only have 180 characters. I think using Twitter too much has trained me to misquote things in small sound bites. Speaking of which, what happened to Warrior? You know, this is a class that people have brought the most, and yet it's underperformed across all of the three major contenders for the best class. It struggled against Mage severely, it struggled against Hunter, and even the class it's supposed to beat, it's barely beating more than half the time. Do people just bring too many warriors? Is Warriors just in a bad spot? Are they building the wrong deck list, Derek, or perhaps we just not respect them at all?
I think a combination of all. I mean, I obviously respect a lot of the players who are bringing Warrior, but I think the main thing is it's just the life cycle of Hearthstone. As a deck rises in power, it rises in popularity, and then people will be bringing decks to counter it, and that's exactly what's happened here. A lot of mages, a lot of hunters teched to deal with the Warriors, and therefore, because it's making up pretty much 40% of the field here, I believe, in Las Vegas, it's just being countered a little bit too strongly, despite its high power level.
That's right. I think that's a really good summary of it, and why maybe we'll have to see if Warrior struggles continue, or perhaps maybe day number 2 is where a few anomalies can really rise up. One class that we couldn't really show because there's not a lot of data is Druid.
Right.
Druid has a 50% win rate, like a little bit cut above, but it only has played, 40, 50 games. It's not really too much that we can draw conclusions from. However, the longer the day goes, you might see that this one deck is able to be an anomaly and maybe worthy of contention moving forward in Specialists. So with that, we're going to take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to find out what's going to happen in round 8 of Swiss. So don't go anywhere. The Masters Tour Vegas is about to get started for day number 2.
Welcome to Hearthstone Masters. Today, we're going to share one of the biggest changes coming to Hearthstone in 2019, an entirely new competitive format called Specialist. Specialist will be the default competitive format for Hearthstone Masters. From online Masters qualifiers to live Masters Tour events to the pinnacle of competition, Hearthstone Grand Masters. Ready to learn how the new Specialist format works? Let's dive right in. In this new competitive format, players select 3 30-card decks to bring to a Specialist tournament. The catch? All decks must be from the same class. In this regard, Specialist is a major departure from most other competitive formats. Amongst every player's 3 Specialist decks, one is designated as the primary deck. The player's other 2 decks are designated as secondary and tertiary decks. There are no special limitations placed on a player's primary deck aside from regular Hearthstone deck construction rules. However, a player's secondary and tertiary decks must share at least 25 cards in common with their primary deck. In other words, secondary and tertiary decks must mirror the primary deck with up to 5 cards swapped out. It is important to point out that duplicate cards count when comparing to a primary deck. For example, if you want to include 2 copies of Twilight Drake in your secondary deck, and there are no copies of Twilight Drake in your primary deck, then you must spend 2 swaps to include both cards. Unique or not, if a card isn't in your primary deck, it counts towards the 5-card difference limit. A player's primary deck is important for another reason. Whenever a new match starts, both its players must begin by piloting their primary deck. Only after the first game concludes can you choose to swap into your secondary or tertiary deck. You do not announce which of your decks you will be using in the next game, and you do not have to swap. After every game, this process repeats, allowing players to swap or stay until the match concludes. Importantly, you can swap to any of your decks between games, primary, secondary, or tertiary, including returning to your primary deck if you have previously swapped out of it. And those are all the rules for Specialists, Hearthstone's new official competitive format. So what are you waiting for? Get out there and start brewing your own primary, secondary, and tertiary decks to get a jump start on the new format and innovate like the pros.
Let the battle begin!
Welcome back, everyone, to the Master Store Las Vegas as we get ready to start off day number 2 of Swiss, beginning with round 8 with myself, Frodan, and Derek Disrespect Brown. Or should I say, lack of self-respect Brown, with that shirt that he's wearing. Of course, we're not just here to talk about fashion, we're here to talk about decks. So what do we have coming up here for our featured match here, Derek Brown?
We have, Frodan, A83650 versus wiRer, and it's kind of an interesting battle because A83650 is a player who last year had a real upswing in his career. He had a very, very strong performance on the HCT circuit, and as we can see here with his Rogue, he's doing pretty well with it so far. An interesting deck list, pretty standard outside of the Sea Giants, which tend to have gone for the most part, but the secondary deck is where things get pretty interesting.
I think the secondary deck almost seems like a joke in a way. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to acquire so many cards with Spear the Shark. I might as well play Mountain Giant, which is not exactly a card that I was anticipating. Is it just against the Warriors? You're playing like, you know, one less backstab. You're not really having the sap or the SI7 agent. You're just going to play big, giant things and try to crush them.
It makes sense. I imagine it is mostly against the Warriors, and it's not without precedent. There was a kind of Barista Lynchen rogue that was floating around a while ago before the more standard Spirit of the Shark one had been reached that did just rely on getting Mountain Giants down as early as possible. But speaking of slightly off-the-wall choices in terms of the meta, this is even more so from wiRer, a player who very much trusts his own opinion and his own testing above all others, has come to a really weird Shaman deck. I'm not even sure how I would describe this. It's not quite Control Shaman, it's not quite Aggro Shaman, it's kind of like Token Control Shaman, I guess would be the closest way to describe it. But it's got some pretty interesting tech decisions on the secondary and tertiary as well, even with the Doomhammer that could be thrown in there, or the Undertaker as well.
Yeah, the Undertaker is extremely spicy, I'd say, because you don't really expect that in a class like Shaman, so it's fantastic to see wiRer innovating as he usually does. For people who've never heard of wiRer, he is a big innovator on deck lists, a lot of time posting things that just look very weird, and for good reason, because the more I look at wiRer's deck list, the more I realize that I do not know how to play Hearthstone like this guy does. He just thinks about it a very specific way. If you can remember, like, back in the day, there were just like a handful of players that whenever they posted lists, sometimes it would just be like, how do you ever win with this? I don't understand why you are successful, and whenever I play with it, it just feels like it's really bad. wiRer is one of those players, and I think it comes down to his ability to innovate, but more importantly, just his style of macro planning. You know, like, okay, these are like the resource that I want to trade, or this is like, I'm going to be holding these cards. No, I'm going to play this one a little bit more aggressively. I just feel like whenever I watch him play, or I guess watch him do interesting stuff, I learn a lot.
I fully agree, and I think it seems exactly like the style of deck that wiRer is so proficient with. Like you said, knowing the macro game plan so effectively is his greatest asset in his Hearthstone play, and he will need to know that with this deck, as we saw with the Stormbringer in there in combination with the Thunderhead as well, both recently buffed in the Rise of the Mechs patch. Maybe he'll be going for a kind of wide board token game plan against the Rogue to try and push and out-tempo them early on, but maybe he'll be going for a more control plan, going for the Hagatha's scheme to blow up the board, leading into the Walking Fountains and Hagatha herself later on in the game. I've got to be honest, having not played this deck, I'm not entirely sure how it should be approached in the Rogue matchup, but I cannot wait to see how he approaches it, the Master.
Yep. As you can see, they're getting ready for their pen and paper. But let's go into game number 1 here between A8 and wiRer. And looks like the Rogue is on the play. I just want to see if this slow defensive Shaman can get the job done. Because when I saw some of the Shamans being played, it felt like Shaman was having a very low win rate. But overall, there were a few of them that were just breaking the mold. And it could be the fact that Shaman is weak. Could be the fact that wiRer has a specific deck list. Could be the fact that we're all very bad at control Shaman, and this guy just gets it.
I think it's a combination of all three. We've seen some of the control Shamans fall pretty flat on their face at the tournament here. Obviously, not having the survivability to deal with Bomb Warrior, it feels like, and then the likes of Mage can just kind of run circles around them with all the giants they're going to be creating, for which there are not sufficient answers. But I think wiRer are going with a slightly more aggressive package, as we can see here. Snip Snap, Lick Him, Spirit of the Frog. These are all just kind of aggro Shaman cards that he's got in there at the moment, and he may be using them to end the game a lot quicker than a regular control Shaman would.
Taking notes of all the cards that he has. It's something that I think is really important to be diligent with, because in a control deck, you have to make sure that you're taking inventory of your resources. I mean, it's important to do it for aggressive decks, but control decks, on average, tend to see more of their cards as the game goes on, versus aggro decks. A lot of times you might be forced into really specific lines, and you just have to just take whatever you get.
Right, and when you're playing to outs with an aggro deck, it's pretty simple to keep track of. It's like, have I played Leroy or not? Is that an out that I can go for? And those are memorable cards that are easy to keep track of in your head.
Yeah, versus, oh wait, did I play like my second copy of like the small removal spell?
Right, exactly.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Nap Hagel. So this has potential for a lot of upside, but at the cost of not really pressuring his opponent whatsoever.
Whoa, man.
Thunderhead.
This hand is so good from wiRer.
Yes. Spirit of the Shark. Sorry, Spirit of the Frog. I get all those animals mixed up. Spirit of the Frog is very powerful for this deck, and wiRer can just let A8 draw a card with the Nat Hagel, and then next turn go Thunderhead with Zap, and that'll clear off most things. Thunderhead with the recent buff with the becoming a 4-mana 3/5 into a 4-mana 3/6. Pretty sizable difference. You might not think that the 6 health matters that much, but it just means that Militia Commander or Dynamatic have a hard time killing it, or even just like anything that just becomes like 5 attack. You don't really see it until it's in action, and you're like, wow, this thing just never dies.
It makes all the difference in the world. If you slam it on an empty board against a lot of decks, that kind of just ends the game right there, is the power level of Thunderhead as it stands. Which I think is good recognition from wiRer. Like, it's easy to look at Shaman at the moment and say it's just not doing as powerful as stuff as Warrior and Rogue is, but if you realize what is making the class powerful at the moment and abuse that as much as possible, then I think it's got some real merit to bring here. Especially when A8's first few turns have been pretty slow. Very small amount of damage being represented so far, leading up into, I guess, hopefully for his sake, a Togwaggle, but he's going to need to find more lackeys first.
Yeah, it almost seems like with wiRer's hand that he has the ability to even take it slower. Like, he has Cragwall now, which makes me think, does he want to like hold on to some of his spells, or does he just want to grab the board right here before turn 5 on A8's side? I think there's a case to make for both, but given how powerful Thunderhead can just be on its own, and then you still can play Snip Snap the turn after, or even Hex, I think the flexibility of his plays improve a lot just by having this.
Oh, the synergy of all these spells and Overload working together with the Frog and the Thunderhead. This is just devastatingly powerful here. And A8 doesn't really have the reactive answers that you would expect from such a slow hand.
Yeah, and I like this from wiRer to use a Lightning Bolt. This might feel like a little weird if you're used to using all your cards for value.
Yeah.
But the idea is that he's getting so much board presence with it. And he still has the mana flexibility to play Snip Snap, or even just use another Lightning Bolt and climb further onto the board. This is a really tough spot for this Rogue to be in, because Rogues don't play Fan of Knives, and even if they did, A8 still wouldn't be able to answer the board entirely without using another card.
This Shaman deck looks fun.
It's very fun.
I want to play this.
Yeah, and you know, I saw Cora tweeting about it too because she was bringing control shaman, but she's like, yeah, like I don't think my deck was bad. I don't think I played bad. I just think maybe it got some like tougher matchups that I'm not used, that I didn't expect to be hitting a lot. You know, she was like, I played against like Mech-Cthulhu Warrior. I was like, oh, well, that sucks. Like, you can't really beat that if you're playing a control shaman deck. But I think it's because we vastly underestimate the card engine from Shaman. A lot of times, Shaman prior to the Roscon's Rumble expansion struggled with card draw a lot.
It was Mana Tide Totem was pretty much your best option.
Yeah, and Farsight.
Oh yeah.
It was like, why rely on a card that's just generally unreliable? But when you play things like Farsight and Haunting Visions and all these other cards that might feel clunky, because of Spirit of the Frog, it helps smooth out those draws that you're not exactly sure if it ends up being good.
Yeah, I mean, it just allows you to play a super low curve Shaman deck with a lot of cheap spells that generally would just run you out of value.
Right. Not that he has to play low curve either, you know.
That's fair. He can play the expensive stuff as well.
I like this use of Witch's Brew as well. Like, Thunderhead is clearly a problem for A8 to deal with.
This is a smart play. I like this a lot.
Yeah, and he did draw his 3-mana spells, so it's not like he loses out too much, right? He has like Haunting Visions and other things to generate resources. Yep. Having that Spirit of the Frog with Witch's Brew is actually a really cool combination because you have like the echo-like effect on Witch's Brew, so you can, like on the same turn, draw like all your 3-mana spells. It's pretty dope.
My favorite is Haunting Visions with Spirit of the Frog. You can just play it, reduce it down to 0. You can draw like a 1-mana and a 3-mana card from your deck. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's also a deck building challenge too in itself. You know, we've seen a lot of people like kind of wonder how they want to distribute their spell usage, because if you go too much on the Frog, then you're too dependent on it, like Auctioneer. But if you don't have enough, you just basically didn't collect enough value.
So many options.
Maybe that's what it is. When it comes down to it, perhaps there's just like the wrong control shaman deck list.
I think it's very possible.
Yeah, when I say wrong, I mean more like players are just having imbalances too much.
Yeah.
And because wiRer loves playing defensive shaman decks, he just nails it because he just like understands what he needs to win games in the metagame, right? Like he's like, okay, I just have to have X amount of removal, X amount of healing, X amount of pressure tools.
Right. I think it's really smart because we've, as a community in Hearthstone, I think come to the conclusion that a slow Fatigue or Elysiana-based Shaman just doesn't really get the job done at the moment. Right. So wiRer has said, okay, how can I make it better then? What can I improve to make that work? Yeah. And he said, let's go more aggressive. Get all these just minions that you can throw on the board and start killing your opponent.
Yeah, because Shaman does have good tools. It
really does.
They have good pressure tools in the form of just burn spells or like bloodlust type things. They have good resource generation. They have good silence and removal effects. Hex is still one of the most effective cards at dealing with those things, like Mountain Giants and whatnot.
A lot of powerful options this turn as well for wiRer. We could see like Swamp Queen, Hagatha, and Mutate to get an 8-drop.
Yeah, I think that would make sense, but Countess Ashmore just also improves the play. Also, that's actually really funny, too. The Countess Ashmore double dips on the Walking Fountain. Wait, and he gets a Gilnean Royal Guard for immediate rush to keep pressuring. This is really big, because it still keeps wiRer's board very bloated and hard for A8 to effectively remove everything.
And with the Life Drinker gone now for A8, he needs to start stabilizing this board state, or he's going to die.
Cheap shot, pickpocket, backstab. I mean, Blade Flurry is okay.
It's like 8 mana, he can just clear the board. It's not great.
Yeah, I mean, he's at a point, A's at a point where, you know, he has, like, the dream scenario, right? He gets to play Togwaggle and collect double treasures, but in this situation, he's worried about dying.
Yeah, I think that's just a little bit too slow. He's got so much stuff to do with his hand anyway. He just needs to play his cards.
So perhaps instead, he can just utilize all of his lackeys. He can clear off this Gilnean Royal Guard. He can even Blade Flurry. I think he's just a little bit off from doing everything. Like Backstab Cobalt does 6 damage, but he would have to. Oh, he would dagger and hit the 3.
Yeah, or we could see like Rush, Witchy Lucky.
Yeah. I was saying for the Blade Flurry play.
Oh, right.
The board. You'd have to dagger up, attack the Gilnean Guard, and then Blade Flurry, which I think he doesn't want to take any more damage. Although, you are leaving up 4 more powers, so you still have a sizable chance of just dying from a random spell being generated.
Is going face here ever the way to go for A8? Like, he knows with the Countess Ashmore being played, there is 100% at least one Walking Fountain in hand.
Right.
I think very possibly, if there's no Ziliax in there, 2 copies.
I mean, there's got to be lifesteal, period.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so even if it's no Ziliax, like...
There's healing.
There's healing, and it's not like A8 has only a face hand. He's got Eviscerate as his only like card, and now also with the commitment of the lackeys, by the way, A8 doesn't have a High Spirit Togwaggle activator, so now things get really awkward. I gotta say, like, I think A8's hand is just looking like a losing combination.
Yeah. And
oh wait, he can get the lackeys back. Mass resurrection. In all seriousness, though, this might be. It's actually a funny thing too to like think about Blade Flurry with Waggle Pick. Okay, looks like instead he's gonna favor getting this Henchman Burglar and SI7 agent to strike it down.
yeah, that makes sense. Saving the Blade Flurry for the moment.
Zerg's Cloning Gallery is also an interesting choice. I'm just looking at all these high impact cards, but A8's choosing the Frost Nova Wind Fury, which makes sense if he's able to secure that.
But weirdly enough, despite how full his hand was a turn ago, he's pretty much run out of value.
Right. Because I think he used his Foundation, like his lackeys, very aggressively on the board.
Yeah.
Turns out he's pretty far behind. And now look at wiRer. He's just pushing with damage. He just collected enough incremental value, and now, because Lickum is insane amounts of damage for 2 mana with Overload, A8's dead next turn, unless he uses his Frost Nova.
Frost Nova and the Life Drinker as well can keep A8 pretty safe on this turn from dying, but again, how he stabilizes and actually pulls this back becomes a very different question.
I wonder.
Yeah, Life Drinker, Frost Nova freezes the board. He still has a few mana crystals remaining. Can use Eviscerate or use Wind Fury perhaps to even take down a couple of these minions. I think I like use of Wind Fury better because it tends to because it's a harder card to use. Eviscerate's more universal. He's gonna just leave these minions on the board.
I guess maybe he's playing to the out of another Waggle Pick so he can Blade Flurry.
Right.
Perhaps.
Well, if I'm wiRer, I definitely want to find a way to set up a 2-turn lethal. I wonder if that means he's going to set up a potential bigger board through like right now, this turn he can just go full on the board with Snip Snap. He can even play Cragwall actually to get another Plague of Toads to set up another Overload. I think another thing to consider is how he budgets his Overload crystals the next couple turns. And of course, he could also look for lethal with Swamp King Hagatha.
Wow, yeah.
This is actually one of those interesting moments where, like, because I'm pretty unfamiliar with wiRer's specific deck, I kind of want to just see what he does, because I can make a case for, like, anything, which is board development, resource generation, or just, like, you're far ahead enough, you go for the Swamp King Hagatha. Oh, with the zap with the spell damage, by the way, very convenient. So Cragwall.
Wow.
So this gets this Plague of Toads back, which is just a lot of stats. And I think this is like a good halfway bridge because, for one, wiRer is developing the same amount of power he would with the Snip Snap while getting another card of Rain of Toads to keep the pressure going.
I think this is not a play that wiRer like really wants to make, but I think he's making the conclusion that Rain of Toads is just super important for locking out the game. Like, if there's any way for A8 to come back in this game, he can shut that down with Rain of Toads.
Right. So is A8 just dead here? We have Vendetta to help get past these minions.
Wind Fury doesn't really do all that much anymore.
Right. So Blade Fury, Eviscerate, Sap. I mean, that just deals with everything. Wow, this is actually a pretty decent push here from A8.
He's alive. He has no more healing in the deck, I believe, unless there's a Ziliax to stabilize him.
Well, I mean, 8 damage is still pretty respectable here with the Wind
Fair
Fury.
enough, fair enough.
Yeah, this is an excellent clear. wiRer's 1 damage off lethal. Oh, man.
1 mana off the Dream play as well.
I know, because if he had the Thunderhead Rain of Toads, that would have taken up 7 slots exactly with the 2 Volt Elementals be able to come out and rush those minions down.
Could see, I suppose, at the very least, just Kragwa's Zap, but I think we could see something a little bit more powerful on this turn, like Rain of Toads.
Yeah, Rain of Toads just seems a little better. It overloads him for 3, which is slightly annoying, given that he wants to play things like his Walking Fountain. But nice thing about this attack, too, from wiRer is that it shuts down A8's ability to use his dagger to trade into any minion. Shadow Step.
I think he's realizing he needs a miracle to save him now.
Yeah, he needs heal. He needs cheap, efficient healing. Haunting Visions.
I give up.
And that's it. A concede from A8. There's no healing innately in the rogue class. Would have to pull it from the neutral pool. And wiRer is 1-0 up over rogue. Which I feel like it's its worst matchup, but maybe there's something there. And like, Shaman has so many good defensive tools against like AoE. It's got good AoE with the Hagatha stuff. Yep. It's got good value generation. It's just, the thing is, whenever you look at Shaman, whatever it excels at, you can think of a class that does it better.
Right.
But Shaman puts all of those things into one package. It's like a jack of all trades, master of none, which makes it a very hard deck to fully pick apart, but it's also an easy deck to crumble because it doesn't exactly excel dramatically in one area.
And I think that's what wiRer is taking advantage of, is the fact that he does, I would guess, seem to be pretty good in most matchups. He's got the defensive mechanisms early on to fight against Rogue. He's got the healing, which you need against Rogue a lot of the time.
Good pressure tools.
Exactly. A lot of really good pressure tools. A lot of card draw as well with the Counter Sashmore, the Spirit of the Frogs, and also just the core of the deck, it feels like, with Thunderhead, just giving him so much mid-game dominance, means that any of the tempo decks have to have an answer for it if they have any chance at all in the game.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and I am very fond of Control Shaman type decks. And, you know, it's been a deck that has given me the most tournament success whenever I competed. And I just love what I'm seeing right now. I am digging it. And wiRer as a player has always been on my radar. He's kind of been like, he's kind of just been like the underappreciated or like the ignored middle child of like the German Deutsche Soccer Guild family, because people look at like Casey for like the fun, like all these like cool random rogue decks, or they look at like Viper bringing all these like really weird anomalies that he does really well with. And I feel like, you know, he's like in the middle there, right? Because Casey being the old guy, Viper being like the newer guy, so to speak, in terms of being on the public scene.
Yeah, fully agree. Whenever you ask Casey who he's practicing with, he pretty much always says wiRer. Like, he is the behind-the-scenes guy. We've seen it from a lot of the German players who used to be the behind-the-scenes guys and are now coming into the forelight, like with Kolmari, who we have here as well. Even Viper, for a while, was that player, as crazy as it sounds like.
Right.
Let's take another look at A83650's Rogue here, sticking with the primary, it seems, which makes some amount of sense. I guess I could maybe hear him switching over to the clearly anti-warrior build with Ken and Mountain Giant.
Right, that makes sense. There's too many targets to hex, and it's very difficult to remove things with just like a lightning bolt. Mountain Giant would also just be like one of those things where like you play that on turn 4 hypothetically, and then your opponent has Thunderhead. They have to have like all the optimal removal in order to take it down. But I think maybe in his mind, A8 is probably just going to stick to his core deck with his primary, because it just still needs to kill the Shaman. And Mountain Giant slows his game plan down a lot versus having like SI and Sap and backstab to just like pressure the Shaman. So I think that might be the logic of why A8, I think, is sticking to his primary deck here.
Yeah, I think he learned his lesson in game 1 with, oh man, just thinking back to it, the heal on that Thunderhead was so sick. Just not being able to kill it off for the whole game.
Yeah, it makes sense.
He needs the answers to
that. When you look at Echo cards, it's really hard not to feel baited into wanting to get the maximum value. You think, I spent this card slot here because I wanted to repeat. In fact, that's like the appeal of the card. Otherwise, it's just a very underwhelming card. Too many heal 4 is pretty garbage in most Hearthstone decks. But in that situation, because of, like, we forget that part of the reason why Echo's good is because of its flexibility. Yeah. Imagine if it was like a 4-mana heal 8. That sounds a lot more reasonable, like 3-mana, 4-mana heal 8. But the fact is you can make it more modular and make it fit according to the need that you have.
And I think that's something that a lot of players overlook with, well, with actually exactly Witch's Brew, is using it on your minions. It's very too often saved, I would say, for healing on the face as a kind of pseudo-forbidden healing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of why I think people underestimate Snip Snap at first. They're like, oh, like if you just play as a 3-mana 2/3, that's not really that impactful.
Yeah.
But it's the idea that it can do that, or it can scale all the way to make this really aggressive mech, or it can just be giant board presence.
Yeah.
And on top of the mech synergies. This is the part where you
Thunderhead's
usually
pretty
say
good.
something, Derek.
I could not. You were making me chuckle. You're too delightful, Dan. I can't even talk.
Oh, thank you.
I can't even.
Take a number. All right, Haunting Visions. Something that wiRer can invest in now, or he can save for later. This is actually one of the things that he's hesitating a lot, and it makes me wonder why, unless he's just trying to not give away information to AA. I feel like Haunting Visions here makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, with Haunting Visions, like, you want to get the mana discount when you're playing it, because if you're just using it to discover a spell, 3 mana discover a spell is not especially powerful. But like you said, spending the mana while you can does make sense. Leave yourself open for a potential top deck Thunderhead next turn.
Wow. Well, hold on. He's got a Eureka, which is really interesting given that his hand... Well, the worst thing that happens is he summons the 6-mana 6/6, which there are worse things in life when you Eureka. However, Earthen Might is also a decent option to build the board in the next turn because you can Hero Power and Earthen Might.
And well, I've got to be honest, I was most heavily looking at Rock Biter weapon, just as, given that there's no synergy with Earthen Might at the moment, you just get a little bit of extra removal to clear off whatever AA is throwing down.
That's fair, yeah. I like that, you know, and I think it makes the most sense given that wiRer has late game potential with his late Counter Edgemore and Walking Fountain. The way that he could die is if the board gets too out of control. I guess I was stuck in thinking about proactive Shaman, like what can I really do to build the board with Eureka or Blessing of, not Blessing of Might, Blessing of Elementals.
Earthen Might. Blessing of Zap.
Yes. Green Jesus buff. That's usually what they call Thrall in Warcraft.
Oh, really?
But yeah, they call him Green Jesus. Because Thrall is supposed to be like the savior of the board, I believe.
I thought it was just funny words that you were saying. Made me chuckle anyway.
That's one thing that I kind of wish that I knew more of, which is like the WoW lore of stuff. Because I do find it really fascinating. It's just that there's so much that it feels like I'm studying. And also, I'm with people who I cast with people who usually just like do not care about that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. I've just never played WoW.
They'd rather wear very interesting clothes that aren't even theirs. I'm not talking about anyone in particular, though.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Some reasonable lackeys being found here for A83650.
Oh. A Wild Pyromancer, which is okay for now, but could be a problem later on because any spell he plays off of the Ethereal Lackey will damage his own board. Cold Blood is normally very powerful. It is nerfed, so it's a lot weaker.
These are some pretty good spells he's getting, to be fair. Like, Cold Blood may seem underwhelming given the relatively recent nerf down from 1 to 2 mana, but just being able to pile up the damage quickly is pretty important, I think, in this matchup.
Yeah, and I think you're starting to also see the importance of Thunderhead just to answer those big wide boards. If he had a Thunderhead, I think this board is
insane.
Dead.
Yeah. But he can still find himself a Lightning Storm.
He had that opportunity previously, but he ended up passing for a second Haunting Visions. Which was interesting. Yeah, his first Haunting Visions had a Lightning Storm, and I want to say a Voltaic Burst.
I didn't even see that.
So
that is interesting.
He did end up foregoing it entirely.
I mean, it's pretty clear that he anticipates that this deck can often fall behind, given that he's got 2 copies of Hagatha's Scheme in this deck to fight back against the early aggression.
I like that he takes down the Ethereal Lackey. I think wiRer understands that rogue spells can really give him a lot of trouble in this spot.
Rock Biter on a totem as well. This is some old school Shaman we're seeing.
Well, it makes sense given that he wants to spread out his attacks.
Yeah, I like it.
It's just interesting uses of cards that you don't really see that often. I wonder how wiRer's going to handle his next couple turns. Reign of Toads makes a lot of sense, right? Because he's trying to fight back for the board, but he then messes up his next turn. He only has 4 mana crystals afterwards.
Yeah, and like, this is really not how you want to use Reign of Toads against Rogue. Like, Reign of Toads is after you've cleared up their board, Reign of Toads locks out the game because they can't get any damage through to face, and you kill them very quickly thereafter. In this situation, A8 can just go for, you know, Vendettas, Eviscerates, SI7 agents. There's a whole bunch of stuff that he can do to make quick work of those frogs. Exactly.
Yeah, like people made a joke that Reign of Toads was like the Shaman variant of Spreading Plague.
Yes.
It's like they call it Spreading Toads, but Spreading Plague was always played reactively to a board exactly like this. Reign of Toads is actually at its worst when you play it up against a board like this, because your opponent can often pick it apart, and then you're stuck with the overload afterwards. You're holding the bag.
However, with these couple of cheap spells or the lick him in combination, wiRer can make some pretty good quick work of this board.
Yeah, the Pyromancer going down is actually an interesting decision point here for wiRer, because if he plays Zap on the 2/2, like if you leave up the Pyromancer, your opponent's forced to trade in the 1/1s before they play a single spell. Versus if you zap the Pyromancer, your opponent can just choose to do other stuff.
I personally really like going for the Zap here for 2 reasons. Like you said, firstly, A8 can just trade in all the 1/1s first and then go for the spells. Secondly, he really doesn't want to overload next turn, so that turn 8, wiRer can just go into the Walking Fountain to try and pull things back in his favor.
That's a good point.
So I like overloading as much as possible on this turn to set up for a strong turn 8.
Yeah, I think that he really needs to play that Walking Fountain too, because he's using the Lickum to trade into the minions. And
yes.
He knows that he's going to be lower than 18 at the time, because the Sinister Strike came out. So your lackey number 2 here, or number 3 rather, picks up a backstab. That should allow him to clear off most of this. Oh no, he doesn't have an active Vendetta. It's a 4-mana Vendetta. Reign of Toads ends up sticking.
Surprisingly good here. Doesn't have the anything to combo with it like Stormbringer. I mean, he'd be overloaded anyway. But.
A with the Shadow Step on the Miscreant. Reduces his range of burst, but gives him more value off of cards.
It makes sense, actually. His hand is pretty light on actual minions to throw onto the board, so I think I like developing a couple more lackeys.
Oh boy. Although, if he plays the Spirit of the Frog, he's playing the Walking Fountain next turn anyways.
But does he have to? Even just a single Lightning Bolt could be enough to combo with the Spirit of the Frog instead of the Walking Fountain next turn.
It's true. The Lightning Bolt will pick up Witch's Brew, which will pick up other cards as well. It looks like wiRer instead pivots, valuing the possibility that he's able to get...
I guess this makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, we're talking about the Lightning Bolt into Witch's Brew. Like, it's a possibility, but all of that sounds decisively weaker than a Walking Fountain.
Yes. And I think A8 knows that's probably what's coming here, given that wiRer isn't even swinging with his weapon. Nap Hagel coming to his favorite fishing spot. It's 2 games in a row where he comes off the face as lackey. I think I'd like to see a Cold Blood come out of A8 here. Just want to go aggressive.
You just want to hear the attack sound of Nap Hagel.
Well, I want him on the Evil Miscreant, but also, you don't really hear the attack sounds, right?
Oh yeah, if
Spectator?
it's the opposing, yeah.
You have to be playing.
Oh.
Oh, interesting. Another Reign of Toads. It's worth considering.
Reign of Toads.
I think the Walking Fountain is just better than I am.
Yeah, I think he's realizing it's just too much damage. As soon as a Leroy comes down, even with the Reign of Toads in play, like, it just gets chipped away by the Miscreant.
Right. Pagel going down is also interesting, because I wonder if it was more valuable for wiRer to eliminate the lackey to stop, like... actually, no, you know that he's holding 2 other lackeys. So it wouldn't stop a High Spirit Togwaggle, guaranteed.
It's super interesting as well to see from wiRer that his playstyle is very much use the lick him whenever you can. Like, he's swung for 1 instead of 3 multiple times throughout the course of this series so far. which is not the way that a lot of people play it. Like you said, it's wanting to get full value out of all your cards rather than settling for good enough.
I don't want to play it as just a very weak Lights Justice.
Right.
I want to play it as like a buffed Fiery War Axe. You know? There's some funny irony in that. The lackey summons the Cable Rat summons the lackey.
Which came
Which
first?
Which came first, Derek? That's exactly what I was going to say.
The lackey or the rat?
It's these kinds of philosophical questions is why I appreciate your casting, Derek. So, if wiRer goes for Spirit of the Frog Lightning Bolt, he'll have 5 mana remaining. He can play... I don't know. Maybe instead he uses Walking Fountain Lightning Bolt and just clears off more lackeys on the board. He goes back up to 17 and he has a 4/6 on the board.
He'd have 9 mana next turn, which, I mean, I guess that's fine. He could either go for Counter to Ashmore if he's not under too much pressure, or just Rain of Toads.
Yeah, it's too bad that you can't Spear the Frog Rain of Toads to draw anything.
Yeah.
Stormbringer was the only 7 mana spell that got buffed recently.
Well, buffed. Quote. You can't even draw it off of Spirit of the Frog into Rain of Toads anymore.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Nerf.
It just makes sense that Blizzard nerfed Shaman again. Lackey for the A8 to use the Heistbearer and Togwaggle, but because there's no Lackey on the board, doesn't have enough mana to play the treasure immediately. wiRer, I mean, I think he's turning this game around here. The treasure has to come up with something big here.
Wow, this is surprising to me. Was he not looking at Ziliak's Vendetta on that turn? Because he could have completely denied any healing off of the Walking Fountain. Instead, he's going for value.
Healing.
Yeah. Well, it's 2 different ways to approach it, right? You could either go for the damage route of going for Vendetta, Ziliax, deny the healing, go for Stolen Steel next turn to try and find a big weapon, or he can get the Wondrous Wand and hope to take it a little bit further into the late game. It's a very interesting decision point, and honestly, it's going to massively shape the course of this game, because I could see the argument for both.
Yeah, trying to think about what wiRer's best plays here. He could try, and he should know that A has no more lackeys left. So if he plays Walking Fountains, he can shut down the Togwaggle. So even if he finds a way to bounce it and copy it, he doesn't have lackeys to draw. I believe the Miscreants were used already. Goblin Lackey. It's interesting. So now he can utilize Goblin Lackey and Hex if he wants to clear off a lot of the board.
That's true.
But it looks like he's going to stick to the original plan of what we're talking about, which is cut Togwaggle from the knees, making sure that he just becomes a 5/5. A8 wants to pull a good set of cards here with the Wondrous Wand. Oh, there's a second Miscreant.
Pretty good set of cards, I'd say. Mass Hysteria, Hidden Wisdom, and Strictly Better Witch's Brew.
Hidden Wisdom. I guess A8 says, I need more cards.
Yep. It makes sense. I think at 26 health, it's a very, very different game to last game when he was under threat of dying, and so the Holy Light doesn't feel all too useful.
So I think if I'm A8, I definitely want to Vendetta this 4/4. Stolen Steel. Discovers Doomhammer?
Or Soul Thrays. These are both pretty good.
Yeah, Doomhammer makes sense given that Shaman has like these small totems for you to get past.
I guess.
You can also use it now to push damage.
I guess
5 mana deals 16 damage, Derek.
I guess as opposed to 6 mana deals 16 damage. This makes sense.
This is actually a scary push.
It is. And the slightly higher value line of play from A8 as opposed to the aggression is looking like it's turning out very nicely for him.
So next turn, A8 showing 5, 10, 11, 15 damage. Oh boy.
And so do we see a very desperate looking Rain of Toads?
If you Rain of Toads, you're down to 7 mana next turn. You could set up Spear the Frog or Snip Snap with it. If you Spear the Frog, you're not actually even guaranteed much because Hex isn't going to really pull anything. So you have Snip Snap.
Well, it pulls the scheme, but...
Right, sorry. It doesn't pull anything substantial,
right.
is what I meant.
Yeah, that's not really what you're looking for at all.
So then perhaps Snip Snap is best way to fight back onto the board.
It's actually crazy how crucial Thunderhead feels in this deck.
Yes,
The difference
I think
is
so.
insane.
So he just cuts off 9 power from the board. Makes sense here. Yeah, I mean, if he went for a Rain of Tones, that Vendetta would have just been more damage push.
Yeah, I think I like this a lot.
Also, what he does with this play is keep his options open for the Thunderhead, which makes sense. If he draws Thunderhead, he still has the ability to go Thunderhead, Rain of Tones.
That's true. That's a
and
pretty big
answer the
swing.
board.
Yeah, I think I like it, all things considered. Like, you know, as we've said, Rain of Toads in this point is the final hurdle that wiRer throws down to just block out all the damage from A8.
Spear the Frog number 2. That's not what wiRer's looking for, and I think that might do it.
There are 10 more minutes left to register for the Masters qualifier for Seoul. If you are playing the Masters Tour, and you would
wiRer
like
at
to
this
play the
point,
Masters qualifier for
if he
Seoul,
plays Cactus Ashmore, he basically is dead. There's 3 damage, 5, 6, 7, 8 plus 4, which is 12. So he would he has to play Rain of Toast to even survive here.
Yeah, it doesn't have a choice anymore.
Yep.
Could rush 1 in. I'm not even sure what that accomplishes.
Yeah. The really annoying thing too is that he doesn't know what the Paladin secret is. Thankfully for him, it's not never surrender.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think he's kind of come to the conclusion that he's not clearing this stuff off for a while anyway. But yes, never surrender would have been pretty miserable there.
Yeah. Does A8 have enough to? Oh my goodness! Is that death?
Is he not using it?
3, 5, 6, 7, 11. This would be guaranteed lethal, I believe, if he Thunderstorm or Lightning Storm.
Okay, there we go.
He just has to trade in the 1/1, and then Goblin Lackey. Oh wait. Yeah, Goblin Lackey, trade that in,
Yep.
and then Goblin Lackey, and then finish it off. So good job there by A8, and he's just able to use every single card he needed
Very
in order to
close.
survive. If he wasn't able to get over there, I mean, wiRer was pretty close to turning the corner. That Countess Ashmore would swing the game the complete opposite direction.
What was he even drawing at that point though? Like, I think it's just Ziliax after both the Walking Fountains had been drawn. There really wasn't
Right, and I mean,
too much left.
The Death Rattle has also been drawn too with Snip Snap.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just that A did a good job of not giving wiRer that opportunity to drop the Countess Ashmore very safely. And, you know, also just goes to show you the importance of Thunderhead in this deck. Because Thunderhead is pressure and removal.
Yeah, it's just, I think the importance of playing it proactively as much as possible. And just, you know, to wiRer's credit, the build he's gone for, as opposed to the more traditional control shaman with mostly removal spells, a few late game minions to try and turn the tide later on.
Yep.
He's instead built it to try and aggro out early on, or at the very least fight for early tempo, but he didn't find the necessary cards to do so in that game.
Yeah, very neat stuff indeed. All right, well, either of these players switch decks going into game number 3. I think A is probably already shown that he's just going to stick to his primary, thick and thin. But what is wiRer going to do? Is he going to switch to a more token-based approach to try and swarm the rogue back?
I mean, I think as much as possible, he will just be trying to win in the mid-game. I think he realizes that's his strength, because the deck doesn't have quite enough burst to go for an all-out aggro shaman game plan, like some of the Spirit of the Frog builds have gone for. So I think instead, with some of the cheap spells and Thunderhead, he's going to be looking to just lock things out for A8 and make sure he can never swing back board control, which does pretty clearly come in the form of Thunderhead primarily. But also just the lick him, as we saw the power of that keeping him ahead early on, and maybe a Spirit of the Frog as well. There's a lot of good cards he's looking for that he didn't really hit in that last game.
Yeah, I think that if you look at how things have shaped up, I think it comes down to wiRer's ability to stop that mid-game ramping pressure. The Togwaggle drawing the Wanderer's Wand was like pretty impactful too, given that it hit like a lot of those mid-sized minions that are very clunky to play, like the free Hedgeclan Burglar, the free the free Blink Fox and stuff like
Miscreant.
that. Oh, Miscreant, you're right.
And that's also worth saying, very much to A8's credit there. I think I was strongly considering a line of play that I think would have just lost that game, of going for more aggression, killing off the Walking Fountain without taking any damage. But I think his desire to play the Wondrous Wand and Heist Baron Toggle was actually pretty instrumental in him taking that game. So a good piece of decision-making.
Yeah, it's easy to get baited by thinking about the immediate, like, oh, if I don't remove this, I'm going to lose.
Yeah.
But the sab on the Walking Fountain was definitely something that I didn't consider, and it ended up being a really powerful tool to give him that, because he knows that wiRer has to invest 8 mana into the board.
Yeah.
Snip Snap on 3, but he's got that Thunderhead, which is really important. In fact, he has Thunderhead plus Zaps and Sludge Ripper and Rain of Toads.
This is quite the hand. This is much more what you're looking for wiRer.
Oh my goodness.
And for A8, he's back to the kind of hand he had in Game 1, where he's just trying to wrestle back board control, but he has no minions left with which to do that.
All right, wiRer already kind of figuring out how he wants to do this. Based off his other previous plays in game number 1,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he went for a full board overload.
Me neither.
But he doesn't have enough board space for it, though.
Well, just Thunderhead double zap. That's nuts. He can then try to not overload on the following turn so that he can head into Rain of Toads on turn 6.
Well, he could Thunderhead, Zap. He could coin out the Sludge Slurper, too.
That's true. That's true.
So he trades one of these minions in. And then Sludge Slurper will give him a Lackey to play for the following turn. I guess this just has him keep the coin, which is in case he needs to smooth out his curve in the future.
Yeah, I think that's the crucial thing. Is next turn he can just go Sludge Slurper Hero Power or Sludge Slurper Lackey, Rain of Toads, and then on the following turn coin out the Walking Fountain, perhaps even.
I just like the idea of having a zap in the hand to like squeeze it in for
That's
0.
fair.
But I mean, the coin helps you make up that difference. And now A8's in a really tough spot. He already has like I should be going face hand.
Yes, absolutely. But he can't even afford to spend the mana to do that because he kind of has to kill the Thunderhead.
Right. So backstab, waggle pick.
Yeah. I guess we could see backstab, like waggle pick face on this turn, because if he leaves up the Thunderhead, like it's not generating anything more on this turn anyway. But I think the all face game plan is just so unlikely to get him there. He's got to try and win back board.
Oh boy.
Wow.
Oh boy, he can't deal with the first Thunderhead very efficiently, but what about a second one?
And if it's not answered, we can just see Rain of Toads. Like any development from A8 at all gets fully traded into, and then Rain of Toads completely repopulates the board yet again. Oh.
Yeah, at this point, he is playing a Token Shaman, right? A8 just has to use all this stuff defensively.
The downside here for wiRer is he doesn't have enough board space to keep winning even more.
That is funny. Lack of board space. But I mean, he's got sizable power, and that taunt totem is actually very annoying for A8.
I mean, this lack of board space is actually kind of annoying. Like, he's obviously very much in the lead, but if we were to see Ethereal Lackey here into Fan of Knives or something, like maybe A8 could pull this back because wiRer isn't developing enough.
wiRer's like, oh man, is the Edwin coming?
Wild Pyro again. Nat Pagel again.
Another 0/4. I believe that can only attack when it's damaged.
Yeah, goes to a 4 attack minion, but yeah, that's not happening anytime soon.
And wiRer, he's pretty close. He's got 5 damage on board plus a lightning bolt. That's 8, and A8's going to be trading for the rest of the game. So I think Rain of Toads here is more than enough. Looks like you know, as much as Shaman is doing really well here, I think A8's deck kind of beating itself too.
I mean, yeah, this game, to be perfectly honest, was just A8 drawing nothing. It's pretty sad to see, because I thought last game was actually really interesting in how both players had to approach it. But unless a miracle can be found if at A8.
Oh, gosh. It's just looking so awful, and A8 has to generate stuff here.
Maybe that was a bit of a misstep from wiRer to not kill off the rat, because it does allow for Shadow Step to try and find an out for A8. But I mean, it's still very, very fringe.
All right, Hunting Mastiff. Yeah. A8's gonna take 2 here with 5 showing on the board. Wires 1 damage off lethal.
Hey, there we go.
And that's gonna do it. That was kind of a very fast game number 3, and sometimes that happens, but more importantly, I think this also showcases like what Shaman might be lacking, which is the ability to punish this. I feel like there's a lot of Shaman decks out there that let Rogue survive way too long, despite him having an awkward draw. And wiRer being able to invest into like a double zap, like building that big board, just goes to show you the importance of being able to press in once your opponent slows down. So a job well done, and a lot of respect being shown by these competitors. wiRer improves to a 7-1 score in the Swiss.
Got to be the... I mean, is he the lone Shaman left in contention for going to the top 16 or top 8 at this point? At the very least, he's got to be the best one at 7-1. There's not many players who can boast that good of a score so far. And with his playstyle, in addition to his very strong deck building, I think wiRer is a real contender to take it all the way.
Yeah, I think so. In terms of just like also being a surprise factor that people can't really prepare for, that's what makes us so scary. And the thing is, because he's practiced this deck, he's going to be a lot more knowledgeable about the small interactions that you need to do to win a matchup than his opponents do, that they'll be learning it as the series is being played. If you're playing in Grandmasters and you see that ahead of time, you can practice this matchup. Like, oh, I'm going to play Warrior against Shaman like a lot. But now you're like, you're not sure, and then you're like, oh, I got matched up against him. How do I face up against it? So that's kind of the give and take with playing a deck like this in a bigger field.
That's the advantage of being a player like wiRer in general. You are just unpredictable. Players cannot always prepare for your play style, whereas you can very much exploit theirs. And I think he's expected, or he's prepared for all kinds of matchups, because even against the Warriors, his deck is very top-heavy. He's got a lot of threats that he can throw down there along the way. So I'm excited to see how he will fare against some of the Bomb Warriors along the way as well.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our first series here in round number 8 of Swiss at the Masters Tour Las Vegas. When we come back, we're going to have more round 8 coverage and update you guys on what's happening around the tournament.